All right. Hello, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome. My name is Ashley Rodriguez. I am the Development Director for Voice of San Diego. Thank you so much for being here. Day 2 of PolitiFest. If you're unfamiliar with us, Voice of San Diego is a nonprofit newsroom that holds public officials accountable, and we do our best to make sure people like you have all the information they need to be informed citizens. We depend on people like you, members and supporters, so thank you so much for being here, for supporting us all year round. A big thank you to our sponsors who made tonight possible. The Google News Initiative, first off, who enabled us to have this virtual event, which is incredible. The University of San Diego College of Arts and Sciences, who supported all of the students in San Diego to be able to attend this for free. And the San Diego Foundation, who sponsored our community conversations. If you need translation for this session, it is available. If you just look underneath my face, probably right now, there's a little globe. You can click that to hear us in Espanol. A few more sponsors to thank: Cox Communications, SDG&E, the Atlantis Group, the City of San Diego Retired Employees Association, the San Diego Democratic Party, Business for Good, and this session's special sponsor, the City Heights Community Development Corporation. So thank you to our friends at CHCDC for sponsoring this session on City Council District 9. A quick reminder, we have events starting from yesterday all the way through Saturday, so be sure to look on CVent, our event platform, check out all the sessions and sign up for what you're interested in. Recordings of most of the sessions will be available the next day, so you can also look at whatever you missed. Please be sure to connect with our attendees, other sponsors and speakers on CVent as well. You can go ahead and click around, browse through. You can also buy a special Voice of San Diego mug or glass to support us even more than you already have by being here. Translation, again, it's available right below, and next to that button, or just slightly above, you'll see a Q&A button. If you have any questions for the moderator or the panel, go ahead and click that and I will field them to them. Of course, we want you to share and engage with us on social media too. What would PolitiFest 2020 be without that? So use the hashtag PolitiFest2020 and find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all that good stuff. You can also find your host on Twitter at Max Rivlin Nadler. I'm excited to welcome Max Rivlin Nadler from KPBS. He is their Speak City Heights reporter, and he will get right to all the action. Here you go, Max. Thanks.
Thanks, Ashley, and thanks again to Voice of San Diego and PolitiFest for having us, as well as the City Heights CDC for helping to sponsor this conversation that we're having. It'll be a little bit different because it's just me and Mr. Elo-Rivera, but I would really enjoy this opportunity to explore his positions and how he wants to help District 9. So Sean, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely, Max. Thank you for having me, and thanks Voice of San Diego for putting this on.
So I envision this as kind of a free-ranging conversation, and we'll get to questions that people might have for you. We'll try to get to that earlier, so this could, again, be kind of a conversation and people can get to know you better. Right now, I'd like to just start with kind of the elephant in the room, which is that there were some developments in the race this week. Your opponent, Kelvin Barrios, suspended his campaign on Monday. This came after admitted misuse of funds while he was acting as the San Diego County, the treasurer for the San Diego County Young Democrats, as well as some inaccurate and amended filings for his campaign. Yet he remains on the ballot and has been evasive with the media about if he won, whether he would take the seat or not. So right off the bat, what's your message to Barrios about moving forward with this campaign? And what's your plan to win this election, even though ballots have already been printed with your opponent still in the race?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the message for Kelvin would be, the voters deserve to know whether or not he's in or out. And I think that I'm a little concerned about the last couple of days. The evasiveness that you mentioned is concerning. Democracy demands a thorough vetting of the folks who are pursuing public office, a intense look at our records, our fitness and qualifications for the duties that we are attempting to assume. And by suspending his campaign, I'm growing increasingly concerned that Kelvin is attempting to avoid that scrutiny while still leaving open the possibility that he could assume office. The litany of, the list you just read is a concerning one, to say the least. I thought that it was the right decision to suspend the campaign. And I hope that that will be the decision that Kelvin sticks to, and does so in a way that allows for the community to move forward with a focus on the issues. Because that was my initial statement, Max, was that I was glad that this would allow us to focus on the very important issues facing District 9 and the city of San Diego. Unfortunately, by being evasive, keeping the website going, doing things of that nature, it still isn't allowing the community to fully move forward. And so that would be, you know, I guess the statement right there.
Okay, so getting that out of the way, I think that obviously what's been going on with your opponent has kind of overshadowed the substantive issues of the race. So I'd like to focus on that for much of this discussion, and get to know your positions a bit better. So let's just start with District 9 itself. The seat is currently filled by Georgette Gómez, who's now running for Congress. She's not running for re-election. So what pushed you into this race in the first place when you saw the news that she would be leaving the pretty powerful position of city council president?
Yeah, you know, those first hours of after Congresswoman Davis's announcement are very, you know, vividly burned in my mind. I was actually in a meeting with some of the young folks I work with at Youth Will as the executive director over there. We were talking to some people at the county about, you know, doing better for youth throughout San Diego, and all these messages just started, you know, flooding in after that news. And, you know, the very first people were, you know, good friends of mine. They reached out and they said, you know, Sean, you should really think about running for D9. And I kind of laughed that off. And then the messages continued from folks who are in elected office, from community leaders who I have a great deal of esteem and respect for, and, you know, had to give it some real serious thought. And you know, the initial things that came to mind, Max, were the crossroads that it feels like San Diego is at in this moment. And this was a year ago, right? So the world has moved very quickly and quite a bit since then. But, you know, the housing and homelessness crisis, climate change, the issues with public safety, law enforcement, and then, you know, what is of particular importance to me, which is the you know, real chasms in opportunity for young people throughout San Diego, depending upon the neighborhood that they grow up in. And the chance to do something about that from the position of city council certainly was intriguing, but I'll be honest, Max, my initial response was that there should be a woman of color to succeed Council President Gómez if possible. And I did do some work to see if that was possible. I had just been elected in 2018 to the San Diego Community College Board of Trustees. It was very important to me that my colleagues and the chancellor over there, that I touch base with them and get their feelings about it. They all said, you know, we would miss you, but you'd be a great council member, and you will serve our students and faculty and staff well if you are in a position where you can influence all of the city. And of additional importance to me, Max, was the voices of those who'd helped get me in the position on the community college board. We ran a very, very different sort of campaign for that seat, a grassroots organizing effort that was really led by young people. And the last thing that I wanted was for them to feel like I had climbed their back into elected office and then, you know, use that to propel myself to a different position. And, you know, time and time again, Max, the thought was, you should do this. You know, we will all be better off with an advocate and champion for, you know, for students, for young people, for the various groups that I do my best to show up for. So, you know, with that in mind, you know, we gave it some thought and we got in the race because it seemed like the best thing to do and an incredible opportunity to make positive change, which has been the driving, you know, force in all of my career decisions since 2008.
Right. Well, Sean, I'm interested because I would like to kind of see what the difference is here. In 2018, when you ran for the community college board, you were running against David Alvarez, and something that you were running on was the idea that you didn't want that position to be seen as a stepping stone. Less than 2 years later, you're moving forward, possibly, to the city council. So how is this different than kind of what we've seen in this district before, especially right now, where you have Council President Gómez using this opportunity to run for Congress, even though arguably the second most powerful person in San Diego who could bring a lot of resources to the district from that position?
Yeah, it's a super fair question, Max. So, I always expect it. The one thing I will, kind of correct the record on, I don't think that our campaign in 2018 made, what David was running for in 2020 a central issue of our campaign. I continuously said that I thought that we were just the best suited for that position. That being said, I get it. Like, I understand the optics, and it was one of the things that I said when folks encouraged me to run. I acknowledge that. So there's a couple things. One, I'll go back to what my own colleagues on the community college board said, and it was that they thought that they've all endorsed me, and I'm incredibly proud of that, right? So, they're not, the most famous politicians in San Diego, but they are very, very good people who are deeply committed to our district and our students. And with that in mind, they said, we will miss you and you should do this. And I think that to me, really, really important in assessing whether this is, me ladder climbing, or if it's me, pursuing a way to make a bigger difference for everyone in our community. Now, I also, recognize that there should be some skepticism. Okay, so what's next, right? Are you just going to jump into the next spot that opens up? Look, there's no political chessboard up in my house. I don't do this that way. I would have, 13 months ago, if you would have said I was going to be running for city council in 2020, I would have told you were completely insane. I want to do this job at city council because I think it's an incredibly important job. I'm committed to doing the job. I want to be there. I got married in November. The idea that my wife would sign off on another campaign after this one and the one that we were together for in 2018 is, she's not having it. I'm here to do this job, right? And the last thing I will say, Max, is, when pressed, to make the point about whether or not this was a central issue of the 2018 campaign, there were multiple times where in forums, the candidates were asked, and I think people were trying to do it as a trap for David, if they would commit to staying for the full tenure, or, and I don't make promises I can't keep. And I told them, I don't know what will happen in my life, right, between, now and 2022. And so I think that that's an important thing to keep in mind. I completely respect and understand where the question comes from. But, I'm here for the 4 years to do this job, and hopefully beyond that, if the voters will have me, and I want to do the job well.
Great. So let's talk about the issues at hand and basically, the needs of this community, this district, which is quite varied. You've got Kensington, you've got City Heights, all the neighborhoods that make up City Heights, all the way down to Southcrest. So what the platform that you're running on is opportunity for all. And keep it brief if you don't mind, but what do you identify as maybe the top 2 leading issues that you need to address for this district right now? Again, given that it is quite varied.
Yeah, Max, it's a super important thing to note for District 9 especially. It is diverse in every sense of the word, right? And that's what drew me to District 9. That's what made me fall in love with this community when I came to do work here back in 2012 as a legal intern. It's the idea that there is all sorts of diversity, from ethnicity to race to socioeconomic status. But and why that was so meaningful to me is because I know how difficult diversity can be and how beautiful it can be when it works. So it's something that's familiar to me, and I recognize the challenges of it. But what I also know is that from knocking on doors in the primary, personally knocking on thousands of doors and having conversations, the work that I've done here as an organizer and leading organizers, I have a very intimate familiarity with the issues that are most impacting people throughout the community. Number one, and this has been the case since the first day that I walked into that free legal clinic at Hoover High School in the summer of 2012, housing and homelessness are number one. It's the fear that those who are in a home right now may no longer be able to afford to pay rent next month. It's the concerns about the apartments that folks are renting not being kept up to code, and habitability being a concern for those who are afraid to speak out because their immigration status leaves them vulnerable, or because their families' histories of dealing with government in the countries that they came from were very traumatizing. It's the folks who are living here and growing up here and would one day love to buy a home, but are quickly seeing their neighborhood gentrify and become too expensive for them to ever have hopes of buying a home here. And then it's homelessness, right? Which means that whether you're living in the heart of City Heights or in Southcrest or in the most beautiful neighborhoods of Kensington, you are seeing homelessness impact your community. And that's a humanitarian crisis which breaks the hearts of people throughout this district, and also does raise concerns about health and safety. So that is a big number one, Max.
Well, if I could just keep you on the number one for a second.
Yeah.
In terms, we're in a crisis right now. People cannot pay their rent. We are having a deeply unequal recovery, if we're having one at all. The eviction moratorium that's statewide is set to expire next year. There's the CDC moratorium, but again, this doesn't afford people the chance to cut down on the rent that they owe, but it just keeps adding up. The city has run some rent relief programs, but all of those have been tapped out fairly quickly. What would you do to help the community to pay their burden for rent, or cut down on that in any way?
Yeah. So first, I just want to acknowledge the chat that was there. I apologize for using that phrase. Mental health is an issue of incredible concern to me and my family. It's an issue that's impacted my family in a very, very real way. And I apologize for using that phrase in a flippant way. I couldn't take the issue more seriously, and I just want to acknowledge that and apologize for it. That was my bad for sure. With respect to the housing issue and keeping people in their homes, Max, and making sure that they're not burdened by rent that's just stacking up. Look, when the next council enters office, there will be the possibility of a humanitarian crisis if we don't deal with this. A wave of evictions and displacement that would create an incredible amount of upheaval throughout our community. The moratoriums are a Band-Aid at best. And to your point, and I'm a renter myself, and so I come at this from that standpoint. But I think it's also important to note that the moratoriums are one of the reasons they're a Band-Aid is because on the other side of a rent not being paid through a moratorium is potentially a mortgage that needs to be paid, and a bank that will be expecting that check. And what I know is that evictions, while evictions are incredibly, something we must avoid at all costs, we also cannot have foreclosures, because those foreclosures will ultimately result in the buying of properties by Wall Street banks who are even less concerned about the well-being of renters here in San Diego. And so I say that because I think it's important that we think about long-term solutions, not just short-term. And so, rental assistance, well, it may seem incredibly expensive right now. It is far, far less expensive than what it would cost to get people off the streets if they end up homeless. It's a very, very worthwhile investment that should be something that San Diego considers during all times, not just COVID-19. Additionally, we are going to have to do the most aggressive forms of lobbying and advocacy from the city level to state government and the federal government to ensure that they deal with this problem in a meaningful way. Because while the city can hold it together for some time, I do have real concerns that's all we are doing is just simply holding it together. We're not fixing it. And those are not the same things, right? So, first things first is making sure that we, again, keep people in their homes, and the emergency rental assistance is my preference for that for sure, because it doesn't lead us to a position where folks have a big backlog of rent to pay, or where we're increasing the likelihood of foreclosures. And at the same time, we need to make sure we keep our eye on the ball in terms of advocating for the longer term solutions at the state and federal level that we're going to need.
Right. So the city budget is hamstrung by support from the state and the federal government, and that could change by the time you possibly take office, or it could not. But the city has a budget that it controls itself. Even if revenue is down, it still has a budget. One thing that you've called for is looking at the budget for policing in San Diego and reinvesting some of that money in other social services. This kind of fits a larger context of calls across the country for quote unquote defunding the police. I know you've shied away from that word, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts on using the budget that we have now to address some of the issues that you've talked about, including homelessness and housing.
Yeah, Max, in June, the Union Tribune asked candidates for local office if they'd write an essay, be willing to write an essay about, our response to defunding the police. And in that, I first and foremost called for, San Diegans everywhere to, do a better job of listening when it came to what the movement for Black Lives was asking for, and to take a step back and have a more thorough and nuanced analysis of what public safety really means. And in that, I think I specifically said that safety, first, is this universal need and that it's subjective, and two, what that looks like for folks, that the most pressing safety concern can be very, very different for some of us. And, safety is included in safety is having a roof over our heads, right? It's having a safe street to walk down or ride a bike through. District 9 has some of the deadliest streets and intersections in all of San Diego. And the idea that we wouldn't consider, roads and streets, housing as part of our public safety discussion seems, a little short-sighted on my part. So we should certainly be expanding the conversation about what safety means. And I want to do that at a neighborhood level, Max. I want to engage community in the same processes that I've engaged them in as an organizer and as a leader of organizers, where we talk about the world as it is now, the challenges that people are facing, and the world that we want to see. And I think that through having that conversation, through an organizing conversation, at its core, we will ultimately learn what neighborhoods really, really need to feel safe and can allocate resources accordingly. And I think that that's going to look differently in different neighborhoods, but that's okay. That's really, really important, because again, safety is such a subjective thing, right? What may make you or I feel safe can be very different for the next person. And I think that is very much true neighborhood to neighborhood. I've had, again, as someone who's knocked on lots of doors, so many conversations with people. And I really do think that it's a conversation that needs to happen at the neighborhood level. And once we do that, we can do a better job of allocating resources accordingly to enhance the overall feeling of safety for everyone in San Diego.
Yeah, I want to get back to your second priority in just one moment, but while we're talking about reallocation of possible resources and using the city budget, right now, San Diego's undocumented population is hurting. It is unable to access much of the relief that has been offered to people, what little there is. And on top of that, are often performing the roles of these essential workers, putting them on the front lines of this health crisis. How could the city, again, not just going and advocating at the state or federal level, how can the city take steps to support its undocumented community, especially in your district where we know there is a sizable population?
Yeah, it is the one of the most important issues in District 9 for sure, and in San Diego. And Max, similar to what I talked about with housing, when it comes to the analysis of this issue, I always go back to those first moments here in District 9 when it's in those legal clinics, the stories I heard, the conversations I had with people. And I was here in the summer of 2012, the first day that DACA rolled out. I was at a church here in City Heights, registering and having folks helping them make their applications, fulfill their applications for DACA, and the incredible pride they felt when they got those cards, when they felt like they were seen and safe in a way that they had never been before. But that is an opportunity that's afforded to far too few people here in San Diego. And this is a part of on our website right now. If you were to look at our top priorities, we actually list racial justice and equity #1. I put this above it, kind of in my mind. Max, racial justice and equity go beyond being an issue. They are an overall a concern that should be thought about whenever we take any sort of make any sort of decision or take any sort of action as a city. But included in that racial equity plan is a conversation about immigration. And how the immigrant community is so important to San Diego. So the first things that I want to do is make sure that we have a legal defense fund, that San Diego is investing in that. Investing in a legal defense fund for our immigrant and refugee communities, I think that's an important part to keep in mind is, we've got folks with various sorts of immigration statuses here in District 9 and throughout San Diego. And with those different immigration statuses come, different needs. And so we want to create that legal defense fund so that families are not being broken up simply because they can't afford, proper representation. A little mistake on a form or in a otherwise very otherwise minor legal proceeding can lead to really heartbreaking consequences when it comes to our immigrant community. Literally, the breaking apart of a family. And San Diego should be doing all it can to making sure that does not happen, to mitigating those issues. We need to make sure that we have a really robust immigration protection policy where we're actually being proactive and thinking about what, again, immigrant and refugee communities need in order to feel safe. That's super important. We think about surveillance and the way that the cameras were set up. That has a whole different meaning to a community that feels like they can be literally pulled out of their home at any time, or comes from a place where a surveillance was something that could lead to the disappearance, the permanent disappearance of a family member. We have to be so much more sensitive and aware of the realities and trauma that folks in our community are dealing with when it comes to those issues. I'm not going to run through the entire list next, so I know that we want to move through several issues here. Yeah. What I will say is this, is that my belief in the importance of making our immigrant and refugee communities feel a full part of this community is I'm 100% committed to that, to the point where I think I'm the only, I haven't seen another candidate with such a robust policy platform when it comes to immigration. And I actually, do even think that they should have, our immigrant and refugee community members should have a more meaningful role in the city decision-making through voting as well. So again, it's of incredible importance to not see, hear, and include the immigrant and refugee communities in a more meaningful way is to literally be, to be silencing and shunning a critical part of this community.
Ray, and I know I sidetracked you before. You said there was a second priority that you're running on, and maybe we've touched on it already. So I just wanted to give you the opportunity to highlight that if you want. Otherwise, we can keep going on the questioning. Yeah. So the second, when you said top two, the second one on our list is the climate, right? And so we say clean and healthy neighborhoods because here in District 9, there are many neighborhood level changes that need to be made to make our neighborhoods cleaner and healthier. And in doing so, we also can be doing our part to make sure that San Diego is doing what it needs to do to address the global climate crisis. I'm happy to dig into that more if you'd like, but as a top level issue, that is number two for us. Well, yeah, let's talk for a second about the transit issues that face your district, the district you're trying to represent. It's shut off from the trolley system. There have been some improvements, but bike lanes are coming, but taking a while. Things seem to move a bit glacially. How would you speed up access and create healthier and safer streets? Yeah, so the first part is making sure that we have a robust mobility system, not just transportation or transit, but mobility in general, right? We want to make sure that folks can get to and from where they want to go in a safe way and in a way that is reducing greenhouse gas emissions, because that has to be
at the top of our minds whenever we're making decisions here in San Diego. So there's a few different things there. One is, certainly for those of us who have an opportunity to serve on MPS or SANDAG boards, to make sure that we're doing all we can to create transit equity and transit justice. The underinvestment in communities such as City Heights, Southcrest, and the environmental racism that has occurred as a result of many decisions related to transportation are super, super important, and we need to make amends for those. But at the same time, I think that at the city level, we can still do more to improve mobility. One of the things that I think I'm excited about that I've heard in conversations with community members is the idea of shuttles, of neighborhood level shuttles to get community members, especially our seniors and families with small children, to make the bus system more accessible. Where I live in City Heights, it's a ways from our best bus lines. It would be a bit of a hike, and if I had small children with me, or if I was older and not able to move around as well, that excellent route downtown that has been created would still be shut off to me, and we can actually make that much more accessible through things like shuttles. And then the other thing that you mentioned, right, is by making our neighborhoods more walkable and bikeable, safer to do those things both day and night. Right now, this neighborhood that I live in and many parts of District 9, including some of the wealthier neighborhoods, they're not safe to go for a walk or ride to the grocery store, and we need to have robust networks for mobility when it comes to walking and biking as well.
Okay, great. So we're going to actually go ahead and take a question from our panelists, from the people who have come to watch our panel. This is Maria Cortez. Maria, go for it.
The legend.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for hosting this tonight. This is great. And I have maybe about two or three questions, real quick.
Just real quick.
Yes, one is affordable housing and the transit hubs. How do you feel about that, and what would you do to make sure that we have the affordable housing and transit hubs here in City Heights? Well, in our District 9, and also the YOP, the Youth Opportunity Passes. What would you do for that and free transit for people? And one quick one, the Purple Line, which has taken 42 years. How would you make sure that comes through City Heights?
Thank you, Maria. Sean?
Maria, great to hear your voice, Maria. I miss you. Maria's, for anyone listening, is a legend in City Heights. I've been an advocate for decades here, particularly when it relates to transportation. So Maria, question one in terms of affordable housing and relation to transportation. It's really important that we're, transit-oriented development is the term, right? It's the kind of the catchphrase there. But it's important, right? We need to make sure that we're building in places that are accessible to transit, and that we are making sure that there's plenty of affordable housing there, and truly affordable housing, not just, quote unquote affordable, but kind of evasive and elusive to many people who live in the community now. Really quick on that point, Maria, I think it's important that we, especially in District 9, where there are so many people who have put so much, it's like yourself, right, who have put so much into improving this community, that we are really, really intentional about making sure that new development includes a space for those who currently live here. We're not displacing people who have poured their heart and soul into making this a beautiful, vibrant community, and only to see it become a place that they can no longer afford to live. So that's going to be very, very important to me. And the access to transit as we do that development is very important as well. Second, with respect to youth opportunity passes, Maria, you and I were in the trenches. I was getting kicked out of MTS meetings, standing there advocating for the inclusion of youth opportunity passes in Measure A back in 2016. I know that when I showed up to Mid-City Can in 2015, you were already 5 years into your advocacy for youth opportunity passes. And for those who don't know, youth opportunity passes are free transit passes for San Diego youth, with the idea being that by providing free transportation passes, we will be expanding we will be expanding access to opportunity for young people who are otherwise shut out from that. Maria, I will show up with the same level of fervor and commitment to getting those passes done as a council member, as I showed up to as an advocate, as an organizer. Our campaign slogan is opportunity for all for a reason, and transportation is opportunity. And so, I definitely want to see those happen. Obviously, I would have a greater chance to play a role in that if I were in a position on MTS or Sandag. I will not get to choose whether or not I have that position, but know that I will be advocating for it nonetheless, and very much want to see it. And then finally, the Purple Line. You've been putting decades of work into that. Maria, I can't promise you that I get to just do that, right? It depends on what role I'm in as a council member. And so what I can tell you is that if I'm on the MTS or Sandag boards and I have a way to vote in that way, obviously the work that the community has done speaks volumes about the energy behind it, about the desire to see a Purple Line here in District 9. But I also don't want to promise you that simply by being elected to city council, I'm going to get that done. Because that's not the reality of it. And I never want to make promises, especially to you, Maria, that I can't keep. And there's no magic wand that will be waved, no matter how much I believe in the vision that you and others have been working for, simply with the day that I arrive to city council. What I will add to this is that I intend to show up as an organizer, right? And so I want to show up and use that position in a way that allows those of us who've been advocating for these issues for a long time to have increased access and power to get those things done.
Cool. Sean, we are coming up. We've got 20 minutes left, roughly, and we've still got some ground to cover. One thing that I'm interested in before we kick it back to the community is your perspective from the community college board. In terms of the control that the city has on actual education within its limits. Obviously, there's a lot the city doesn't have control over and gets kicked to the county or the state, but that is something that the city has some leeway on. So what have you learned, and what would you want to change or empower or basically fund if you get on the city council?
Yeah. It's funny, Max. So one of the things that when I started running, I think I might have even told Scott Lewis this. Scott, there's often a conversation that politicians running for local office, for city office, talk about education only because they know it's popular, but they're not going to actually do anything about it. And I think that's the critique is actually correct. What is incorrect is that there is no role for the city to play in improving education. And there's a difference between controlling education and being able to support and improve it, right? And so I think that the city should absolutely in no way whatsoever be telling teachers what to teach or how to teach. They shouldn't be talking to the community college district about, which courses should be on the list for students to take. But what the city can do is show up to San Diego Unified and for San Diego Unified and for the community college district and for universities as well, for that matter, and say, we treasure the talent that is here in our schools, in our universities, and our colleges. We believe that young San Diegans and students in general have all of the potential that they need in order to achieve great things and make San Diego a world-class city. What can we do to help? And I know from my role on the community college board and the other work that I do with young people that there is a lot the city can do to reduce barriers, to lessen the burden, to lighten the backpack of obstacles and burdens that students are carrying with them into the classroom. I say this as a trustee, and I will say this as a council member, that education is not only impacted by what happens in the four walls within a classroom. Anyone who has gone to school knows this. What happens outside of the classroom very much impacts our ability to learn. I know that from what happened, my time during law school, when I spent a month living in my car. That was a hellacious semester for me. In terms of my academic performance, I barely was able to maintain my scholarship. My ability to stay in school was even jeopardized. And it wasn't because I was dumb that semester. It was because I was exhausted and because I was worried about where I was going to sleep. My safety was in question. What I was going to eat was in question. That had a role that impacted my ability to learn. The same thing growing up. I mentioned earlier the seriousness that I take, mental illness and dependency issues, that very much impacted my ability to learn when I was a middle school student and what was going on at home for me at that time. And so there are many roles, Max, for the city to play, but none of those things will be discovered until we sit down and ask, how can we help? And so for me, step one in that is creating an office for child, youth, and family success, which would help convene the school districts and other service providers for young people and ask, again, how can we do better? What can we do to help? And I think that is the best of investments. We know about the long-term and the benefits of long-term investment in early childhood education. There are almost no things that are a better investment for the public than investing in the early childhood education of our young people. And there are many other things similar to that we just need to, again, show up and ask, how can we help? And from there, we can figure out a way to do it. But if we're not asking that question, Max, if we're simply saying that's their job, that's the school district's job, we just saw a great example of this. The County of San Diego literally tried to cut the students of San Diego State out of our population as if they don't live here. That was, to me, incredibly powerful example of how we think of students, right? Not our problem until they graduate. And that is a egregious abandonment, an abdication of responsibility, and it's a failure of leadership. And I think the city needs to show up and say, how can we help?
Thanks for that. We're going to pick it back to one of the attendees, Simone Arias. If you're interested in talking and want to unmute at this time, you could ask your question.
Thank you. Hi, Sean.
Hi, Simone.
I know that you're very aware of the RCC at Mid-City CAN and its work in helping communication between law enforcement and the community. And so I guess I'm looking on several layers here, and that is, what do you see might happen to improve criminal justice issues in the community on both sides, so that the teens actually have a better sense of making good choices, because they can very easily get pushed into something that they don't even mean to get into. And so how do we give support both for the students and also connect more with the police so that kind of communication can improve?
Thank you, Simone. Sean.
Yeah, so we can get into acronym soup sometimes. I want to make sure that everyone who's tuning in knows what we're talking about here. RCC, which Simone mentioned, is a program called Restorative Community Conferencing. It's a program that was the product of a really tremendous organizing effort led by Mid-City CAN over the course of the last decade to bring a restorative justice option to San Diego youth under 18 in particular. And what it does is it brings, in this form of restorative justice, it brings the person who was harmed, or the victim as they are often referred to, together with the person who created the harm, or the perpetrator as they are often referred to figure out how things can be made whole again. And that's what restorative justice is all about. And in doing that, there's actually a very intense form of accountability that comes into play, where someone who has done something wrong has to look the person that they've wronged in the eye and make things better. And that is, a very, very powerful thing that can yield incredible benefits in terms of reducing recidivism. And not only, it's not only about how that improves the life of the person who made the mistake or made the bad decision, but it also has a powerful impact on making sure that those who are the victims of crime feel more heard. Right now, the American justice system is kind of the worst of all worlds. We have a system where we are very, very punitive, and people tend to really, really be dehumanized and treated in a really, really egregious, inhumane way, still having high levels of recidivism, and at the same time, very, very little satisfaction of those who have wrongs committed to them. So with that in mind, I would very much be showing up to City Council with an eye toward creating a more restorative justice system in general, Simone, not just for youth. I think that it's a requirement for everyone, or should be an ideal that we shoot for everyone. I have a particular interest in making sure that our transitional age youth have an opportunity to access restorative justice. That's a campaign that I'm working with young people on right now. Right now, Simone, as I'm sure you're aware, if a young person commits a crime, if they shoplift on their 18th birthday, they are no longer eligible to participate in that fantastic program that you just mentioned. And they are treated as if they were 35 or 45 years old. And that is a real problem. We are depriving young people in San Diego of their youth. And when we really break that down and think about who is often targeted from, for enforcement, that is specifically most often Black youth, and it is often also disproportionately Latino youth. And because of that, we are literally disproportionately depriving Black and brown young people of their youth. And when we step back and think of it in that way, that is shameful, and we need to take every action that we can to correct for that. So Simone, I obviously very supportive of RCC as a program, and I want to actually expand beyond that and make a restorative justice system here in San Diego that works better for everyone.
We've got a few minutes left. I've got another question, this time through Twitter. This comes from List San Diego. It's about whether you would consider changing single-family zoning laws in your district or in the city as a whole, especially given the long history of redlining and exclusionary zoning in San Diego.
Yeah. So at 4:56, the reason I showed up just before this forum started, I was with the young people at Youth Will who are working on a housing campaign. And they're working on a housing campaign because young people throughout San Diego are terrified that their parents aren't going to be able to afford rent. They have all but given up hope on being able to buy a home in our community. And it's an issue of incredible importance to them. And in the beginning of our discussion of this issue around housing, we broke down the issue of redlining. So we look at the history nationally and here in San Diego. And yeah, it was an egregious practice. It was racist in nature. And the consequences of it are being perpetuated today and being felt in many, many real ways today. That being said, I also want to be strategic in how we address the housing issue. Single-family zoning, the practice itself was racist in many ways. We know that. We know the way the lines were drawn. It wasn't, happenstance or accidental that, certain neighborhoods, the lines were drawn right where, Black, brown, and Jewish folks started to live. That was intentional. At the same time, though, I do want to make sure that we have a focus on ensuring that we build where we have the most opportunity for growth. I want to see as many affordable housing units built in San Diego as possible. And the first area that I see for that are on transit corridors, where we're going to be doing the most that we can to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and making sure that folks have access to jobs. And so I know why we have to deal with the legacy of single family zoning. And I also want to make sure that we're not getting bogged down and distracted by opportunities to really, really build as much housing as possible on those transit corridors. So absolutely, I want to dismantle the legacy of redlining. And I also want to do what is most impactful first things first is do the most impactful thing. And I think that starts with building along transit corridors. In District 9, that means El Cajon Boulevard and University Avenue in particular. There's a ton of opportunity there. I'd like to start there first before we start, burrowing in, deeper into communities.
Great, Sean, we're 5 minutes out from the end of this session. I've got one more question and then a lightning round, unless anybody wants to jump in the chat really quick and ask a question. So a question really quickly here is an issue that is currently going through the city council is the franchise agreement for electricity in the city. Right now, SDG&E is ending its 50-year franchise with the city. Some people have called for a shorter contract with SDG&E. Others are pushing forward with the bidding. City council abdicated its responsibility last month. The mayor is pushing forward with it. What do you think should happen, and should this be an opportunity for the city to raise revenue?
Yeah. So I'm going to be able to answer this in general ways, Max. The thing that I think is getting a little bit tricky for us as candidates, as the more this gets punted in our direction, I think the less leeway we have to speak about it in specific terms, because it's a decision that we could ultimately end up making. So first things first is that every deal that we make as a city needs to be done with an eye toward getting the best deal possible for the city. The days of handouts for corporations, for monopolies, for the corporate entities that are making a buck on the back of San Diegans needs to end. We need to show up and say, you want to do business with San Diego, what are you going to do for San Diego, right? So that's an approach that we're going to take. We also need to do it with a critical analysis that gives these decisions the level of specificity, of attention to detail that they deserve. We can't have any more 101 Ash Streets. This deal, this franchise agreement cannot be, a multi-decade, Ash Street deal where we're wondering a year or two down the road, how did we sign this deal? And then finally, is making sure that we're above board and there are not even the slightest inklings that there could have been any sort of corruption in this. So from an approach standpoint, that's first, right? Is that this is done in the light of day, and this is done with the seriousness and professionalism that it needs to be done with. So that's first there. With respect to the deal, I think that it's important that we obviously don't enter into a 50-year agreement again. That is, the world is just moving far too fast for that. I think that what I am of particular interest in seeing, you mentioned, is this can be this potential source of revenue. Absolutely. Someone is seeking the opportunity to do business in San Diego, to access the public right of way to make a buck, right? And if they're going to be doing that, well, they certainly should be giving back to San Diego. This is an incredible opportunity for San Diego to get a good deal, and we should certainly be making sure that we, yes, extract every dollar possible from that deal because the community deserves it.
Okay, we go to the lightning round portion of this forum. Very quick answers because we're almost out of time. Favorite restaurant in District 9?
Right now, I'm missing it a lot. So Pho Wah, I would say, is number one.
What's the first thing you're going to do when true quarantine is over, when everything is at your disposal?
So I would say probably a Padres game would sound great. Angela, who you probably all saw walk in, I think she's going to want to go to a concert.
And that leads me to my next lightning round question. Best concert you've been to in San Diego?
Best concert in San Diego. What do you say? What best concert in San Diego? That was Ricky Martin? Yeah, okay. That was a good one.
All right, and then my final question, and this will dispel if anybody thinks I've, taken it too easy on you. Who are you rooting for in the playoffs, the Padres or the Dodgers?
Oh, Max, you set me up with that one. I'm a Dodger fan, and I know I might have just cost myself the election with that, but I'm not going to lie to you all. I grew up in a family that roots the Dodgers. We had Padres season tickets last year, and I really do love this Padres team, but I'm a Dodger fan, and hate me for it or love me for it. That's who I am.
All right, and if that's what the election turns on, I guess you're willing to go down with the ship here.
I have to, yeah.
No, it's really ending with the tough ones there.
All right. Well, thank you, Sean, for joining me, and thanks everybody for coming, and thank you, Ashley, for putting this together, and Voice of San Diego for rolling with the punches for this interesting city council race.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Like I said, there's more sessions to come all the way through Saturday, so please sign up for the rest of them. A big thank you to Sean Elo-Rivera, our interpreter, Ana Gutierrez, our moderator, Max Rowland-Nadler, and our sponsors for this session, the City Heights Community Development Corporation. Thank you all for being here, and keep going. There's more PolitiFest tonight and for the rest of the week.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.